You're with Clement Manyathela.
702.
But right now, we start our conversation with the Department of Energy. So the war in the Middle East, as you've seen, has entered its fourth week now. The conflict has disrupted key energy routes, particularly the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world's oil supply passes. And this conflict continues to trigger the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. So how are we being affected as South Africans? And do we have a plan should the war prolong much longer? Remember, this conflict has already pushed international crude oil prices above the $100 billion per barrel, creating uncertainty in global energy markets. And now we know this will have a significant knock-on effect on fuel prices in April. So let's get a sense of where the situation is now with the Energy Department. And we'll get to that, in fact, in a moment. But I want to have a chat with them. I want to also bring in the Chief Executive at the Fuel Industry Association of South Africa, because they've done their own analysis looking at what the situation is likely to look like. So let me start with them, and then I'll bring in the DG at the Energy Department. Sidiso Maqubela, let's start here, in fact. Avhapfani Tshifularo is the Chief Executive at the Fuels Industry Association of South Africa. And then afterwards, we'll bring in the DG at the Department of Energy. Avhapfani, thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you and listeners.
Yeah, so from an industry standpoint, how exposed do you think South Africa's fuel supply chain to these disruptions in the Middle East is, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz?
So, Clement, it's very important just to indicate that South Africa, unfortunately, is not blessed with oil or big plants where we can manufacture our own petroleum products. So we import both crude oil and finished products. So the refining capacity that we have in the country, it meets roughly 30% of our own requirements. But our crude refineries, obviously, they are heavily reliant on the imported crude oil because we don't have our own crude oil. So roughly 70% of our demand is met by imports. So that on its own, it exposed the country and the sector to any political dynamics in the international front. And because the oil and the oil products are priced in the dollar, it means we'll also be exposed to exchange rate fluctuations. Right now, under this current environment, you will see that the rand will also weaken, so that does not really help us as a country. And because also imports, you rely heavily on vessels that are bringing product, the freight cost will also increase. So there are just so many factors that are outside the country that affect us, not by choice, because it's just something that's there.
Okay. I'll come back to you in a moment, Avhapfani. Let's bring in Jacob Mbele now, who's the Director General at the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. Mr. Mbele, thank you for also joining this conversation. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to the listeners.
Yeah. Can we start by confirming whether or not we are experiencing a fuel shortage yet, or nearing that position as this war continues?
Clement, I can confirm from the government side and even from the supplier side, and Fanny can confirm that as well, that in the near term, we do not anticipate shortage of product. We believe that the country is covered up to the second half of April. I think it's important to indicate that, as Fanny indicated, we get most, if not all of our supplies, most of our supplies, obviously as imports, and there is a replenishment cycle that is in place every 6 weeks, we expect finished products to come through, and every 3 months or so, we expect crude to come through. And the orders that have been confirmed confirm that we have sufficient supply until towards the end of April. And we expect that in consultation with the industry, more orders are being placed. We are not at this point anticipating any problems, but we do recognize that the situation is fluid. Things can change overnight. That's the message here.
Okay, but are we not having problems with the shipment of the fuel?
At this point in time, all the majors that we spoke to since last week have indicated that everything is going according to how they place the orders. I think the issue that is there that seems to be confused is localized shortages. It's distribution within the country. I spoke to one supplier this morning who indicated to us that on their side, they've seen on the diesel side, they've seen a surge of close to about 30% in terms of demand just in the last week. And we know what that will do. Obviously, it will run because there are logistical processes behind every supply point, and those are planned on the basis of known demand. If suddenly there's a surge, that may lead to that particular facility running down, and then it may have then to wait to be replenished. But it's is not a signal of shortage of product in the country. There is sufficient product in the country.
Okay, and what happens if beyond April this war continues? What options are we looking at? And is there a way you can then intervene as government to cushion the blow?
If you look at what the majors have done, they've obviously started supplying us from their other hubs, because all these oil majors, they operate across the world, so they've got other hubs where they can source supply. But we know that supply is constrained in a sense that everyone is now going for the same supply. So yes, there are behind the scenes discussions that we are trying to ensure that we are prioritized. But again, this is a commercial environment where we cannot say that product will come from a particular country, etc., etc. But there are discussions, and we are looking at options as a country as well. I think while the focus is on the supply side, I think one needs to emphasize that we need to also put the message out there that as consumers, in times like this, we need to change our behavior. We also cannot behave as if everything is normal. We need to look at our usage to make sure that what we have can take us longer as a country and as users.
Okay. The last fuel price forecast I saw from the Central Energy Fund indicated that 95 octane petrol could see a price increase of over 5 rand in April. Diesel expected to see, I think, 8.60 price increase, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, as you can imagine, there are some South Africans that have begun to panic. Are you saying to them that there's no need to panic? Because, there are some that went into panic buying these fuel products, and they've even inundated filling stations to try and get particularly diesel.
Yes, as you said, we expect prices to increase. But from a supply point of view, we believe that there's no shortage, and we urging people obviously not to rush to the pumps and start stockpiling, because you just then create a disturbance in the system, which will then have ripple effects to everyone.
What's the worst case scenario for us, Mr. Mbele? So let's say if it gets to May and this war continues and the disruptions there by the Strait of Hormuz continue, then what's the consequence on us? Because I've seen some experts warning that, if this conflict is prolonged, as government, you may be compelled to even reintroduce drastic conservation measures. And I wonder if that is an option in the worst case scenario. And what does that look like?
we through the economic cluster, there is work that is led by the DTIC that is being done to look at these options. But yes, if there's no supply, you have to look at demand side interventions to make sure that the little that you have can take you longer. So at this point in time, my view is that no option should be off the table. As to what those options are going to be and the form they're going to come with, I think that is work in progress, and I wouldn't want to jump the gun. But yes, we have to look at demand side. We have to look at usage as an option, and there are many other options that you could look at. Economy wide. There's people in other countries, they talk about rationing. We went through COVID where people work from home. Is that an option? I guess those studies that work will put forward the options in terms of the workplace.
Yeah, and as long as there's a plan, Mr. Mbele, because we don't want a situation where we become reactive. We have to plan, of course, for different scenarios because nobody knows how long this war is going to continue. A lot of our listeners on the WhatsApp line are asking about our strategic oil reserves. How much do we have in that, and how long could they last us for? Are they adequate to meet international standards for supply crisis?
Look, I think this number is out in the open. We have about 8 million.
Is that sufficient?
Barrels of strategic. That if you look at the consumption, that is equivalent to about a month's worth of supply.
A month.
Yes. But I have to indicate that I spoke to, I won't mention the name, but one of the suppliers. Currently in their stockholding, they've got one of the refineries. They've got 2 months worth of supply, and we have 2 refineries. So those refineries do have some buffers with them. There are orders that have been placed. I'm aware that there's about 3 million barrels that is on the way by one of the suppliers. So we should not look at this number in isolation. We should look at it in totality with the other supplies that are there from the refining plants.
Okay. Jacob Mbele, let me thank you. Director General at the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. We still have Avhapfani Tshifularo on the line, who is with the Fuels Industry Association of South Africa. Avhapfani, the common question I'm getting now from our listeners is that, yes, we hear what the department is saying, that there's no immediate shortage risk, but the prices are rising. How do we then explain it in simple terms so that they get to understand where we're at here?
Yeah, I think the rising prices is like an area of concern for everyone right now because, as you have indicated, based on the Central Energy Fund published data, is showing a steep increase in the month of April. So that's the reality that we need to face. And I think it's the major cause of panic buying. Because I would like to believe that the issue of supply of products, it's evident that we've got enough products. Otherwise, we'll have seen a lot of facilities running dry by now. I think we are week 4 of the war. And so the planned imports have been coming throughout this period. Vessels are landing and discharging all the time. So I think what is really important, because we don't want to reach a situation where we artificially force shortage at the sites because people are rushing. Because if we get into that point, it's very difficult to recover. It will take us a little bit longer to make sure that all those sites that are dry needs to replenish. So that's why we encourage people to say stick to your normal refueling patterns. Don't suddenly want to visit the service station every second day because there is enough fuel, as you have heard from the DG Mbele. So what is important is that we need to separate what is stuff that is affected by war, because once product is inside the country, it's now into a normal distribution system, which is not really affected by like what is happening out there. It's now a function of the capability of our own logistics. So our own logistics has been functioning on the basis of assumed demand, which is roughly 67 million liters per day. So if suddenly that demand is now moved to let's say 80 million per day because people are hoarding fuel and putting some extra fuels in some drums, it's not going to help us. There's no way the system can immediately cope with that surge.
Yeah. Okay. South Africa, at least from some observations, has become increasingly reliant on imported refined fuel due to refinery closures. How does that amplify our risk in this geopolitical crisis? And do you think fuel companies are already diversifying supply routes or sourcing from alternative markets to avoid this Middle East disruption?
Yes, there are some companies that were sourcing fuel from areas that are now affected by the Middle East, conflict, which have now either diversified or either they've moved that sort of demand to other companies. So I think, Clement, what you need to remember is that South Africa is not blessed with oil our fellow countries Angola, Nigeria. So whether you've got a refinery or no refinery, you still depend on the imported feedstock, because crude oil, we don't have crude oil. We need to import it. Let's assume that we did not even we had refineries who were manufacturing all our requirements. We were still going to be exposed to the issue of high oil prices because the crude oil itself has moved up and it's affected by the conflict itself. So either way, as long as you don't have your own natural resource, you are dependent on imports, you are going to be exposed. So if down the line maybe when we have major discovery, that is a long period of time, that will change the equation altogether. But as it stands now, we are exposed to the global sort of conflict. Either way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And do you think there are contingency planning, issues that exist within the fuel industry, contingency measures, if this conflict becomes prolonged? Do you get a sense that we are prepared for sustained volatility? Because we've got to prepare even for the worst case scenario.
Our biggest area of concern is the elevated prices. Because you can just think about it, 30 rand per liter, price, that's hectic. So that's really where we are concerned. But in terms of bringing product and continuing to supply the market, we are really not worried that much there. So if we reach a point where it becomes even difficult for companies to afford these prices at the international market, then you're going to have a problem. But we are not there. We're not there. As long as we are still able to pay for the price in the international market, we don't see any problem in terms of supplying the country. We see that yes, it's going to be extremely difficult. That is why we are working very closely with government to really start to look at those scenarios that you are painting, to say what happens if the war goes beyond May, June, and maybe 6 months. What do we do as a country? So we are looking into those scenarios in terms of making sure that we are prepared so that we're not caught off guard.
Well, thank you so much for coming through to help us understand the situation we find ourselves in, especially now that there are some South Africans who are panic buying diesel. Apparently, some are inundating filling stations to try and stockpile. In fact, on the on Twitter, John says, Clement, government is lying to us. There are filling stations that don't have diesel as we speak. So people are quite concerned. So it's important to just touch base with industry, but also the Department of Energy to get a sense of where we are, and if they can, just calm some tensions and reassure South Africans that there's a plan in place should this war prolong. So thank you to Avhapfani Tshifularo, who's the Executive Director at the Fuels Industry Association of South Africa.